endless fights over how to parent Archie and Lily. It is the understanding of the Mark Dolan show that Prince Harry is furious with Meghan and her latest efforts to exploit their offspring for financial and career gain. Yes, folks, Meghan is at it again.
As ever, the Mother's Day collection arrived with another headline-making twist. 2 signature candles, each priced at $64, were introduced using full royal titles in the official product descriptions, and that alone had people talking. Signature Candle 506 is linked to Archie's May 6th birthday and is described as Prince Archie of Sussex's birthday. The scent blends ginger, neroli and cashmere, with the ginger said to be a subtle nod to his red hair, and that detail sparked serious reactions. Signature Candle 604 is tied to Lilibet's June 4th birthday and described as Princess Lilibet of Sussex's birthday.
Harry saw himself as an exploited commodity for public consumption when he was growing up as a young prince. So it's something that he just doesn't want for Archie and Lily. Now, it's our understanding that the latest flashpoint follows months of bitter rows over the endless Instagram posts of Archie and Lily, which are not only unroyal, those Instagram posts, right, on social media,
featuring notes of amber, water lily, and sandalwood, with a water lily connected to her name. Even the symbolism feels carefully layered. Then there's the promotional bundle, priced at $156, pairing both candles with a chocolate collaboration and custom matchboxes. But what has people focused isn't just luxury branding. It's how every product description repeatedly uses the children's full royal titles, and that has stirred a much bigger debate. Because the real question here isn't just about commerce at all, it's about the line between public image and a child's right to privacy. For years, Harry and Meghan made it clear that protecting their children from intense public exposure was one of the biggest reasons behind leaving royal life. The goldfish bowl of royal celebrity, the non-stop media attention, the loss of a carefree childhood. Those concerns were at the center of their exit story. The vision presented back then was simple. Archie and Lilibet would grow up in California, outside the institutional spotlight, free to shape their own identities away from public scrutiny. That was the promise. But then came the Instagram glimpses. Archie at Christmas, Halloween, International Women's Day, Easter egg hunts, ski slopes, holiday cards.
Mother is Meghan Markle. You will not have a carefree childhood. You will be monetized because everything for Meghan is transactional, including that marriage to Harry.
And now these candles add another layer. Archie's birthday and even a reference to his hair colour are written into a fragrance description, while Lilibet's name is woven into scent notes, all marketed under royal titles. That has left critics stunned. Official product materials shared with outlets like People and Town and Country have only intensified the discussion. Some observers argue that the carefree childhood away from the public gaze now seems to appear in luxury product copy, and that criticism has been hard to ignore. And one detail especially raised eyebrows, the ginger note as a nod to Archie's red hair. Several observers called that surprisingly personal, even invasive. Because for many, it echoes something deeper tied to Harry himself, his famous red hair, his Windsor family connection, and the very personal details he once seemed determined to shield. And that's where this controversy gets even more intense. Harry's own personal details were public for most of his life, but Archie's red hair is different. That's a detail about a 6-year-old child who has not chosen public life, and that is where this debate gets serious. Critics say placing something as personal as a child's hair colour into a product description as the special touch that makes a $64 candle feel tied to the child who inspired it crosses a line, because wasn't protecting the children from exactly this kind of exposure part of the original reason for stepping away? At 6 years old, a child can't understand the commercial meaning of having their birthday, name, hair colour, and royal title wrapped into luxury products sold around the world. They can't consent to it. They can't push back against it.
Day collection for her crumbling as ever brand. And it's going to launch on April the 22nd, featuring 2 $64 signature candles, mass produced in Taiwan, by the way. This is not going to be local craft. Let's be clear about that. So 2 signature candles, inspired by the couple's son and daughter. How wonderful.
And they definitely can't grasp what it means for their identity to become part of a brand before they're even old enough to understand branding itself. And that's where the concern gets even deeper. One day, when they are older, maybe trying to live ordinary lives, walking into a coffee shop unnoticed, trying to build identities of their own, they may have to face a world where people have been tracking and discussing them since before they were born. That's a heavy thought. Some argue that creates a strange reality where private lives are being commercialized before those children ever have a chance to define themselves publicly. And many point out this is exactly the kind of thing Harry has spoken about fearing. Reports from multiple sources, including a royal insider cited in coverage around this story, claim Harry is furious over the candle launch, and that reaction has only fueled speculation about tensions behind the scenes. The bigger issue, according to those reports, is that differences over how to raise the children remain a major source of strain, and it's easy to see why people connect this to Harry's past. He grew up under relentless attention, photographed, analysed, discussed, turned into public fascination from birth. He also watched his mother struggle under that same pressure, and that history shaped so much of what he has said he wants for Archie and Lilibet, a carefree childhood, protected from the machine of public consumption. And that's why some observers say this controversy feels bigger than candles at all. To them, it looks like a clash between privacy ideals and commercial branding, and that is what has made this story explode. Then there's the royal title issue, and this is where the controversy moves to another level.
Making them celebrities. When they turn 18 and they can't go to the supermarket and they can't grab a coffee at Starbucks and they can't pop to Hooters for a quick burger or maybe Wendy's for the Baconator, they won't be able to. They'll be papped and there'll be attention because Harry and Meghan have created such interest in them. Because let me tell you folks, fame is a choice.
Because critics say this is no longer just personal, it's institutional too. Prince Archie of Sussex and Princess Lilibet of Sussex are not casual labels in these product descriptions. They are formal royal titles being used in commercial materials, and that has raised serious questions. Some point straight to the Sandringham Agreement, where commercial use of royal titles was understood to be off-limits. That was part of the framework worked out in January 2020, and now critics argue these candle descriptions push right into that forbidden territory. The candles are on sale, the titles remain in the copy, the birthdays are highlighted, personal references are woven into the scent descriptions, and for many observers, that combination has made the backlash even louder. Commentator Ingrid Seward has suggested the late Queen would likely have viewed all this with deep disappointment, and that assessment has drawn major attention. Not because of dramatic palace reactions, but because the Queen was known for quiet, controlled responses. Her frustration, people often said, was rarely loud, but it was very precise. According to those who closely watched her final years, the strain in the family relationship weighed heavily, and Seward's argument is that a launch like this, where royal titles appear so openly in a commercial product, may have represented exactly the kind of development the Queen had feared. What makes that perspective hit harder is the claim that the Queen's hopes for Harry and Meghan were once incredibly high. She reportedly saw them as part of a modern royal future, young, globally appealing, able to connect with Commonwealth communities in ways older generations sometimes struggled to do. That was a serious role, not a symbolic one. There was thought put into Meghan's patronages, into what causes and platforms could suit her, into how the couple could represent a new chapter for the institution. That's why some royal watchers say the sense of disappointment, if true, would have been especially profound.
And is described on the candle as Prince Archie of Sussex's birthday. You're welcome, my husband. Now, the fragrance is said to be a warm, comforting scent inspired by Prince Archie of Sussex's birth date, bringing a soft, familiar ease into the room.
And that is why this candle story has become much bigger than luxury products. For critics, it touches family tension, royal agreements, and questions about whether boundaries once drawn have now been pushed aside in plain sight. And that is what has made this explode into such a scandal. Meghan was welcomed into the institution with what many described as real generosity, and that part often gets overlooked. The early optimism was huge. During the 2018 Commonwealth Tour, the crowds, the excitement, the genuine enthusiasm, it all created a sense that something fresh and important was happening. For many, it looked like the future had arrived. That's why critics say these candle descriptions feel so symbolic, because they see them as the far end of a journey that began with all that promise. The same monarchy that once imagined Harry and Meghan as a powerful force for Commonwealth engagement is now seeing the Queen's own family nickname echoed in luxury product descriptions for $64 candles, and that has left people stunned. Some royal watchers contrast those early hopes with later controversies, including criticism surrounding the Australia tour, and accusations that royal visibility was being leveraged in increasingly commercial ways. That shift, they argue, changed the whole narrative. Ingrid Seward's point has drawn attention here too, that the Queen may have understood royal titles could, in some form, enhance post-royal commercial life. But, as Seward suggests, what may have shocked her was how direct and obvious some of that use appears to have become. That's the distinction critics keep hammering, not whether some commercialization was inevitable, but whether there was supposed to be restraint, because many believed there would at least be boundaries, or at minimum the appearance of boundaries. And this is where those candle details keep coming back into the spotlight. Children's birthdays in the branding, royal titles in the product copy, even scent notes tied to hair colour. Critics say that doesn't look restrained at all. They argue it looks like royal branding in its most open and unapologetic form, and that is why the backlash has been so fierce. Seward has also drawn comparisons to the Queen's complicated emotions as a mother. The idea that she could be angry with a son's choices while never stopping loving him, and some believe that same emotional tension shaped how she may have viewed Harry, frustration mixed with deep personal affection. That final point has hit hard with royal observers, because the argument isn't just that the Queen would have been disappointed, it's that she may have felt Harry turned away from what he could have become.
Signature candle 604 is tied to Lilibet's, and I shouldn't say that word because we don't use the word Lilibet because it's a stolen name, a name stolen from Queen Elizabeth II, who turns 100 or would have turned 100 today.
And for many watching this unfold, that idea makes the controversy feel even more dramatic. The argument many royal commentators make is that love and anger can exist at the same time, and that may be the emotional heart of this whole story. A mother, a grandmother, a monarch can feel deep disappointment over someone's choices while still loving them completely. Those things can exist together, and that tension is what many believe defined the Queen's feelings. Some point to the Andrew comparison as revealing in a very specific way. The Queen has often been described as having indulged him, even spoiled him, and some commentators have argued that kind of parental protection shaped what followed, not through bad intent, but through the consequences of too much indulgence, and that idea has fueled broader conversations about royal family patterns, because some observers see a larger theme, powerful parental love mixed with institutional pressure, producing complicated relationships with accountability and consequence. And once that idea enters the conversation, some naturally begin asking whether similar questions could be raised about Charles and Harry. That comparison has hovered over this story, even when left unsaid. Questions about emotional distance, family dynamics, and Harry's own public comments about his upbringing all get pulled into that debate, and some commentators, including Dan Wakeford in Celebrity Reporting, have gone even further, suggesting Harry was raised in such a protected world that ordinary financial realities were never something he had to think about. Everything was handled, everything was provided, and that creates its own kind of disconnect. Now, critics say that institutional framework is gone, and what remains is a prince raised inside that system, now in California, reportedly furious while watching luxury candles launch using his children's titles in the descriptions and personal references in the scent notes. And that image alone has fueled endless speculation, because to some observers that looks like a collision of two worlds, royal caution crashing into influencer branding, and that collision is what has made this feel explosive. Then the timing made it even more dramatic. Summer approaches, Invictus preparations are building, major royal questions remain in the air, and on what would have been Queen Elizabeth II's 100th birthday, influencer boxes reportedly went out with those candles inside. That detail alone had people talking loudly. Reports that a royal insider briefed Mark Dolan that Harry is furious only pushed the story harder. Then Ingrid Seward's assessment that the Queen would have been deeply disappointed and very angry poured even more fuel on the controversy. And what stunned many critics most was the silence. No dramatic institutional response, no public clash, no correction. Just the monarchy appearing to absorb another blow and move on. For some, that silence says almost as much as the scandal itself, and that has kept this story burning. The candles are on sale, the titles are in the descriptions, the ginger reference is in the scent notes, and critics keep coming back to one haunting point. The very outcome some say Queen Elizabeth tried to prevent in January 2020 now appears sitting in a product listing for a $64 candle. That symbolism has hit people hard. For some observers, there's something almost shocking about the timing. In the month marking the Queen's centenary, and just after tributes reflecting on her legacy, headlines turn to a product description inspired by Prince Archie of Sussex's birthday.
The Mother's Day release also includes 3 bundled gift sets, among them a $156 collection, pairing a new chocolate collaboration with Los Angeles-based Comparte and custom matchboxes, all anchored by candles inspired by the birth dates of Prince Archie of Sussex and Princess Lilibet of Sussex. It makes me sick.
And many say she would have understood exactly what that represented. People often said she always did. But beyond the symbolism, there's also a financial story behind this. And that's where the candle launch starts making commercial sense, even as it stirs controversy. Since the launch of As Ever in February 2025, critics say the brand's path has raised questions. It debuted with Netflix as a major commercial partner, backed by serious media attention and promotional muscle. But reports of that partnership cooling, along with questions about inventory and product momentum, fueled speculation that the business needed a pivot. Jam spreads, baking mixes, flour sprinkles, lavender-themed products. Those early lifestyle offerings generated buzz, but skeptics questioned whether buzz translated into durable demand. Even the sold out in 11 minutes claim from the launch drew scrutiny, with critics arguing a limited first run doesn't automatically prove lasting success. And that's where some analysts say candles make perfect business sense. Lower production costs, lighter shipping, stronger margins, and maybe most important, candles fit naturally into upscale lifestyle branding. This is a category built around emotion, atmosphere, and aspiration. Because candles don't just sell scent, they sell a mood. Wellness, comfort, luxury, domestic elegance, all the things premium lifestyle brands love to market. And that's exactly why some say this move wasn't random at all. It was strategic. What makes it controversial is the way that strategy appears tied to deeply personal family symbolism. Birthdays, titles, identity references, all wrapped into a product category designed to feel intimate and elevated. That's where business meets scandal, and that is what has people talking. For supporters, it may look like smart brand positioning. For critics, it looks like something much more unsettling. But either way, many agree this candle launch was not just about fragrance. It was a calculated move, and a dramatic one. And this is where some critics say the real strategy becomes obvious. Because candles don't just sell fragrance. They sell stories, promises, identity, and many argue that is exactly what these product descriptions are doing. They turn a mass-produced item into something that feels intimate and personal through narrative. Some point out this isn't a new formula. The storytelling around soaps hinted at it before, but now critics say it has escalated, with children's birthdays, name symbolism, and even references tied to hair colour becoming part of the emotional pitch. And that has made people look much harder at what's really being sold, because the argument from skeptics is blunt. Is the product the candle, or is the product the personal story wrapped around it? The Taiwan manufacturing disclosure has become a huge talking point in that debate. Critics say it creates tension with the premium image being projected. A $64 candle marketed through artisanal, emotional authenticity, but manufactured overseas at scale, has raised questions about whether the luxury aura is built more on storytelling than craftsmanship. And that criticism goes even deeper. Some say the emotional connection does the heavy lifting that the product itself might struggle to justify at that price point. In that view, people aren't simply buying wax and fragrance, they're buying an experience, a mood, a connection to carefully packaged personal mythology. That's why the pricing has drawn so much attention. $64 per candle, $156 for the bundle. Those are luxury tier prices, and critics argue luxury pricing usually rests on exceptional materials or extraordinary craftsmanship.
Horrible disaster. First of all, she couldn't call it jam because it wasn't thick enough. It's so runny, so it's called spread. And Netflix have pulled out as the entrepreneurial business partners. They'd invested.
Here they say the premium may rest instead on symbolism, and this is where the controversy gets explosive, because skeptics argue the emotional premium is tied directly to the children, the birthdays, the royal titles, the personal references. Strip that away, they argue, and what remains is just a scented candle competing in a crowded market at a much lower natural price point. That's the provocative claim, that the children's identities become part of what justifies the premium. And for critics, that is where this stops being ordinary branding and starts looking deeply uncomfortable. Some connect that to reports of Harry's objections, saying his reaction may come from someone who knows what it means to become part of the value proposition. Because many note his own post-royal commercial appeal has long been tied to institutional identity. The Duke of Sussex, the Prince, the grandson of Elizabeth II, the son of Charles, and that's why some say this story isn't really about candles at all. It's about whether family identity, royal symbolism and personal history are being turned into product features. And that is why this controversy keeps getting hotter. Critics take the argument even further here, saying much of Harry's commercial value has long been tied to institutional identity. The Netflix documentary, the memoir, the speaking circuit, major media projects. Skeptics argue the draw has often come from his royal connection, not something fully separate from it. In that reading, his identity itself became part of the product. And that is where some say the irony turns sharp, because they argue Harry became what he feared, someone whose public and commercial value is linked to the institution he stepped away from. A powerful claim, and a controversial one. Now critics argue the children are being pulled into a similar framework. Archie and Lilibet, they say, are being positioned as part of a premium lifestyle brand before they have formed identities of their own. Birthdays, names, royal titles, personal references, all becoming part of commercial storytelling. And that is what has sparked such intense backlash. Some observers focus on the permanence of that. Product descriptions live in archives, in press coverage, in digital records that can last for years. And critics argue one day those children could look back and discover personal details tied to branding, long before they could understand or consent to any of it. That idea has unsettled a lot of people. Many point out Harry has spoken publicly for years about what it feels like to be shaped by a role chosen for you at birth.
Well, deep disappointment again. Deep disappointment. She had such high hopes for Meghan and Harry because she saw them as, going into the young Commonwealth and being head of it in a way that she would be head, but they would be spearheading it. And she just thought that they were perfect and they were a perfect couple.
He wrote about those struggles in Spare. He discussed identity, pressure and public life in interviews and appearances. That history is why some believe this controversy hit such a raw nerve. Because the argument critics make is simple but dramatic. Harry knows what it feels like to have identity defined before self-definition. He lived that. And they say that is why these candle descriptions have triggered so much speculation about conflict behind the scenes. Some go even further, framing this as a deeper power struggle between privacy principles and commercial branding. In that view, this is not just a disagreement over products, it's a battle over what the children's public identities become. And that is where the story turns especially explosive, because some critics argue Harry may see what's happening and still be unable to stop it. They frame that as the most uncomfortable part of all, not just the branding itself, but the idea of watching it unfold without control. Whether that interpretation is fair or not, it has fueled enormous debate. Because for many following this saga, the controversy is no longer about candles. It's about legacy, identity, and whether history is repeating itself in a way Harry once fought against. And that is why people cannot stop talking about it. Ingrid Seward's reflections on the Queen's hopes for Harry and Meghan add another dramatic layer to this story. The vision, as many royal watchers describe it, was ambitious. Harry and Meghan as modern Commonwealth figures, young, dynamic, able to connect with people in ways that could strengthen the institution for a new era. For some, that was the promise that was lost. Critics say what makes that feel so striking is the contrast. The role imagined for them was rooted in public service, representing the crown, strengthening relationships, building the kind of soft power the Commonwealth depends on. That was the bigger mission. And then, skeptics argue, came something very different. They point to controversies around commercial ventures, paid appearances, and branding efforts as symbols of how far the reality drifted from those earlier expectations. And many say that gap between service and self-promotion is what some see as the real measure of what was squandered. That contrast is why Seward's comments have landed so hard. Her observation that the Queen was deeply perceptive, canny about people, as she put it, has become central to how many interpret this whole arc. Because the argument is that the Queen's early welcome was genuine. She reportedly believed in the potential, invested hope in it, and wanted it to succeed. And when that hope faded, critics say the disappointment was not simply political or institutional, it was personal too. That's what makes this feel bigger than royal gossip. Some commentators frame the breakdown as the moment when expectations of service gave way to suspicion that royal status was being used more for commercial advantage than institutional duty. That is a harsh interpretation, but it's one that has fueled huge debate, and that's why this keeps resonating, because to many observers, it's not just a story about what changed, it's about what they believe was lost, and how that loss still echoes through every new controversy. Critics say the Queen adjusted her handling of the relationship when she understood what she was dealing with.
I think she'd be very angry with her grandson because she would feel that he'd wasted the importance of the person that he could have become and was becoming. Remember how much we loved him and what a great ambassador he was.
The reported witnesses on phone calls, the stories about careful distance, the separation from succession planning, the shifting of patronages once expected to shape the couple's future. Many royal watchers argue these were not random moves. They were deliberate responses based on a very clear reading of the situation. And that is why some say the centenary has made all of this feel even more dramatic, because many believe details emerging now, disclosures, insider claims, polling fallout, controversies around commercial ventures, even the candle descriptions themselves, are being seen by critics as confirming concerns the Queen may have recognised long ago. They point to each piece as part of a growing record. The reports, the photographs, the backlash, the paying guest controversy, refund demands, and now children's birthday candles marketed with royal titles. To some observers, these are not isolated moments. They are pieces of one much bigger pattern. And critics argue the institution is still living with the consequences. Some say Charles absorbs controversy rather than confronts it. Others speculate William may take a different approach when the time comes. But for now, they say, the monarchy keeps taking the blows, and the story keeps escalating. Because here is the image that keeps haunting commentators. The candles are on sale, the children's titles remain in the descriptions, the ginger hair reference sits in the scent notes, and all of it unfolded in the week of the Queen's centenary. For critics, that symbolism feels impossible to ignore. Many believe she would have been angry, deeply disappointed. But they also believe she would still have loved Harry, because that complicated mix of love and frustration is what families carry, even in royal life. And some say she would have recognised exactly what these candle descriptions represent, who benefits from them, what they signal, and why they have caused such uproar. That is the final sting in this controversy. Because to critics, this was never really about candles at all. It was always about identity, legacy, and the cost of turning personal history into product branding. But what do you think? Is this smart business, crossed boundaries, or something much bigger? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to like, subscribe, share this video, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next explosive update.